Welcome back. This is Mommy Rebellion with another one of my chatting with moms from other places. Today I am with the lovely Kim from the Connected Chef, which is in Queens, New York. And the Connected Chef has always used food to connect the community together. But once the pandemic hit, things kind of changed with how they were doing things. And I'm going to let Kim explain that because she's a little better at it than I am. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks for having me, Chase. Previously to the pandemic, the Connected Chef has always utilized food as a way to connect one another, to ourselves, to our family, and our community. We focused a lot on education in the past, doing cooking and gardening classes with families and kids and adults. And then during the pandemic, right in the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that our role of service to our community was to make sure that those who live here don't have make sure that they have access to really healthy ingredients, and had to really bring things back to basics. And so we started a food relief initiative called Lifeline Grocery, and we started bringing really healthy, nutrient-dense groceries to families across Queens who were out of work and didn't qualify for any unemployment benefits or other government aid. So that's what we've been doing for 7 months.
So you kind of went from having, my memory was that you kind of had classes for kids and parents to learn about cooking to delivering groceries to people. Is that pretty much what happened?
Pretty much, unintentionally, but yes, pretty much that was it. My husband and I, both of us are restaurant chefs. My husband still worked in the restaurant in March, and when our city closed down, we knew immediately that there were thousands of families who were now out of work, typically working paycheck to paycheck to begin with, and didn't qualify for unemployment or any other kind of assistance. So we're then left to figure out how they were going to pay their rent, how they were going to buy food for their kids, and really take care of these very basic needs. And being in the restaurant industry, like food, again, was our medium, and that's how we show our love and support for other people. And so we said, well, let's get some groceries, and we're going to deliver them to a handful of people. And we did not expect things to become what they've become. We started a GoFundMe thinking that we would raise a couple $1,000s. We raised over $20,000 within a week.
Yeah.
And we started delivering to 25 families because we were like, yay, we're going to deliver to 25 families. Like, this is going to be great. And the next week we delivered to 100. And then the week after that, it was 200 and then 300. And we scaled. Now we're delivering to over 2,000 families a week.
Wow.
In 7 months. Yeah. So it was really fast, but really beautiful at the same time to have the opportunity to support families in our community in that way.
So I'm guessing you had to build a team, that you and Omar couldn't go from like 25 to 100 to thousands without a logistical nightmare. So what did that look like? I mean, I know you're an amazing mom, but this mom of 5 is like, oh, that's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, as restaurant chefs, our minds were already very methodical. And so when we were even just doing it for the first week with 25 people, we knew that as restaurant chefs, first of all, we had the relationships with food purveyors and vendors that previously would deliver to restaurants in New York City. And we knew that food was cheaper. So we wanted to order directly from them. That was always our strategy. So we ordered food wholesale from these restaurant purveyors, had it delivered to a local bakery that hosted us and allowed us to use their space. And because community has always been so important to us, it was real, and we've always been rooted in our community. It was really easy to like reach out to folks and say, this is what we're doing. Who wants to help us? And we're fortunate enough to live in a neighborhood where everybody wants to help, and everybody is really feels an obligation to be able to support other people within their neighborhood when they can. So we kind of put the word out and said, we need people to help deliver groceries, and we need people to help pack. And again, the first week we didn't, we needed like 2 people, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
didn't need so many people. And it was at the very beginning of the pandemic. So we also immediately wanted to make sure that we were being extremely safe, because Queens was the amount of,
epicenter, wasn't it? I mean, it was really
the
close.
epicenter. Yeah. And the amount of cases that were coming up every single day, and the amount of death that was happening around us was really scary. And I would walk past our hospital that's close by, and you would see the devastation. And you would see trucks outside that were like ready for folks who had just passed to be able to like make room in the hospital for other sick people. Like, it was real, the energy and the feeling of what it was like to be in the city at that time was terrifying. So people didn't, no, we didn't want people to come out of their house to get groceries. We didn't want people to come out of their house to pack groceries. It was not safe. And so we needed to be really strategic and careful with how we planned everything out as well. But despite all of that, there were so many people who did come out, and we put on our masks and gloves, and we we did all the things that we needed to do to make sure that we stayed safe. And we also knew that, yes, this is dangerous, but people are literally not going to eat. I mean, I would hear stories from families on a regular basis that they were rationing their food, and they were only eating once a day, and small amounts. So it was, the need for this outweighed the risk in our eyes.
Yeah. Now, does New York have any, or New York City have any kind of school lunch program? So here in Maine, for instance, a lot of kids, I think it's up to maybe as high as 40%, I'm not sure, but a lot of kids get school lunches that are subsidized. And so not immediately, but I want to say before a couple weeks had gone by, they'd figured out a system where people could drive up to schools and pick up breakfast and lunches. And they opened it up to everyone. They didn't care if you went to that
Yes.
school. They didn't care if you were homeschooled. Everybody could have it. You just had to come in at certain times. Is that something that New York City does? Or, because I know a lot of that can be like state specific.
Yes, yeah. New York City has always had, for many years now, free breakfast and lunch for all kids who go to school. So exactly how Maine did it, where when the pandemic hit, immediately families, they opened it up to the public, and people were able to grab and go, they called it. And they were able to do that for breakfast, lunch, and even dinner as well. The issue with that is the quality of the food.
Oh, yeah.
And the quality, I don't know how it is in Maine, but the quality of the food that they're giving here in New York City is, it's not food that to be eaten.
Yeah.
And it's food that is not nutrient dense. It's not going to keep you well, especially during a global pandemic. There's no vitamins and nutrients and all of that stuff. That the reason we are supposed to be eating is to be able to support our body and our immune systems. And the food that they're giving is like little things of chickpeas that are like in lukewarm water. Nobody wants to eat that stuff. And like little tiny bags of carrots is their vegetable. Yeah. And this, we also knew the community that we're serving was a community that knows how to cook and knows how to, they just need the ingredients. And so we were able to give them a bag of groceries that was enough for 4 people that would feed them for the week. And it would include 6 to 7 varieties of vegetables, sweet potatoes, broccoli, string beans, 2 to 3 kinds of fruit in there. And it was about 20 to 25 pounds of food. We also gave grains like rice and beans or lentils. We would give a dozen eggs and a half a gallon of milk. because we wanted to give families enough to last them the whole week, so that they can not worry about what they're going to do. And then they can make you can make soups and stews and all these different things from that. And if it was a larger family, when we took people, we asked them their contact information and everything, but we also asked them how many people are in their house, because we wanted to make sure we were giving enough food for everybody for the week. And so if it was a family of 8, they would get enough food for a family of 8. If sometimes there was 13 people living in the house, and then they would get enough for 13 people.
Yeah, that's so important. Having a larger family, that's so important. Like what would feed your family versus what would feed mine with my 2 teenagers and then other 3 kids.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
no, the food that they get here can be somewhat gross. There's a lot of boxed cereal or, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of sugar. I remember a couple of years
Well, and
ago counting all the sugar in one of the so-called lunches, and it ended up being like 68 grams. And I'm like, this is why we have issues with kids' attention spans in school.
yeah. Well, and the city was overwhelmed itself in being like, we very quickly saw how weak our food supply chain was, right? We knew that intellectually previous to the pandemic, but it showed itself. And there were many times where families would go pick up this food and it was like chips and cookies, because it wasn't an actual meal even, because the city just didn't have the capacity to push food into the schools so they can distribute it. That whole process broke down. And we were able to create our own, essentially, that supported our community in a really impactful and good way.
Yeah. And I think it's
Yeah.
amazing that you knew that you were sending this to people who had basic cooking skills. Like, I think that my kids will roll their eyes when their friends don't know how to cook. Like, it just doesn't make sense to them that, I mean,
Right.
my kid's biggest complaint is there aren't snacks, there's just ingredients in the cupboard. Like, and I'm like, yes,
Right.
I'm doing something right now. Go make something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and there's
think so.
other food programs that served people who were living in shelters, or homeless people, or people who didn't have the same kinds of background. So then for them, it makes most sense to offer pre-prepared meals. And that very much happens here in the city still as well, where you need to know your community, right? And you need to know who you're serving so that you can best do that. And we knew that our families had access to a stove, first of all, and they were able to cook with the ingredients that we were going to give them. And it's, the things that we offered and continue to offer are culturally appropriate as well. Queens is a part of the city that we have people from all different backgrounds. 200 different nationalities, I think, are in Queens, something like that. It's an amazing thing. But it also means that everybody's eating different and everybody's used to different things. So we really wanted to make sure that we're offering something that people understood how to cook, and they were familiar with, and it comforted them. It wasn't something that was foreign, and we didn't want people to worry about food. Nobody deserves to worry about food.
Yeah, no one should have to worry about food.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that because not only are you feeding people, but you are able to work with the wholesalers who suddenly didn't have restaurants to give food for too. Like, that must have been sort of a nice bonus to be able to, give them some business as well.
Yeah, and I would have conversations with them in the beginning, and they're like, we now have nowhere to send our food. And the way, again, it's like the food system, but the way that their process goes is they're ordering food from the farms, and they're lining up this food from the farms to get, with the expectation that they're going to be able to then sell it to the restaurants. So they would all of a sudden have ingredients that nobody at home would want to buy, and they're like, what am I going to do with these ingredients? So we would also try to work together as much as possible to see if we can use those particular things so that there's less waste as well, because it was a real issue.
Yeah, it was. And in some areas still is a real issue. So not only are you helping the people who are hungry, but you're also helping the people who sell the food to the restaurants, and you're helping the farmers because they're getting it. Yeah, so that's a really awesome system that you guys created.
Yeah, and it's exciting because now we just launched a new community-based grocery package. And this is our answer to ensuring that families in Queens have equitable access to food. So food equity means everybody gets the same access to the same kind of food.
Yeah.
If you can afford $150 for your groceries, you get a certain kind of grocery versus somebody who can only afford $30, and that's not okay to us. So we created this grocery package where it's kind of like a CSA, where you get a variety of fruits and vegetables. You also get grains and legumes in there every single week, and it's a base package. And you have the choice to pay $20, $35, or $49 for the base package. But regardless of what you pay, you get the same thing as your neighbor who might pay something different. And then there's add-ons available there that support local businesses. So we have a local beekeeper that is right here in Astoria, Queens. And so there's local honey in there that you can buy. There's local produce from an urban farm that is right here in our neighborhood. Fresh baked bread from our local bakery. Like all of those things are there. And the farms that we're sourcing all of the ingredients from for the base package are within 2 hours of the city. So we're making sure that we're supporting local agriculture as well. So it's really exciting. It's a full circle system to be able to make sure everybody's included and everybody gets a piece, of the pie.
And that was not what your plans were when you looked at 2020 in January, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm grateful that this is what we're doing, because this is so much more meaningful. It's what we were meant to be doing. It's what we've been striving for. So we were given this opportunity, amongst a disaster of a year. But we were supposed to open a kitchen studio in the first week of April. We had been in construction, and we had people that I just hired the week before. We had events planned and booked and all of that, and we were ready to go. And that was going to be like a high-end kitchen studio that we were going to get to do our classes and events in. And the next week, the city shut down. And we had to walk away from the kitchen space and this like brick and mortar that I was planning on for like 3 years.
Yeah.
It was devastating. Yeah, it was really, but it was devastating from like a very surface place though. Like it wasn't as devastating as not knowing how you're going to feed your kid.
Right.
And so that, like, I connected so much more quickly to that need. So this sadness of like not getting to have my brick and mortar dissipated much more easily.
Yeah, because you were focusing on what was truly important and what has kind of been the why behind the Connected Chef, at least as long as I've known you. Yeah, that this is,
very much so. Yes.
So
now we get to do all this good work.
I was going to say, I've seen, some of your Instagram posts where you've talked about how your boys have gotten to hang out with their uncle and their dad more. What have, besides getting to create this wonderful system and support people and make sure that they've got equitable food, what are some of the other joys that have come out of this?
So we talk about this regularly in my house, and I think this is probably a commonality for all families in the pandemic, but getting to spend more time with each other. My husband was a restaurant chef, like I said, so he worked 5 to 6 days a week, and not an 8-hour day. It was a 12-hour day. And his commute, my kids saw him a little bit in the morning before he went to work and they went to school, and then that was it, except for the days that he was off. And now we get to see him every single day. And my kids still ironically complain that they don't see us enough, although we're stuck in a house together.
Okay, so I have a theory, all right? I homeschool my kids. They're here all the time. I have a theory that at certain ages you cannot possibly see them enough or hold them enough or whatever it is.
Right.
But then
I
there are other points where they're like, would you just go away? Like, you know,
yeah, it's a little ridiculous. Like, I mean,
it is.
I have like 2 days a week where I'm focused like for the day, for the most
Mhm.
part, on work and building things.
Yep.
Um, and after one of those days, my 8-year-old is like, "You're always at work," and I'm like, "I'm not always at work. That's not real."
It is so
Um,
amazing how they view time. Yep.
yeah. But definitely, I mean, when there's no childcare, right? There's no
Hmm.
school. When we were doing this work for 12 hours a day, we would distribute. In the very beginning, we distributed once a week.
Yeah.
So there was one day a week where we were at our distribution space for 12 hours, from 9 in the morning to 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, pretty much. And our kids were there with us,
Yeah.
and they had masks and gloves on, and they were helping us package the food, and it was outside, so they were running around outside in the
Hmm.
parking lot that was deserted, and they got to see this work. And I think
Yeah.
that is really unique, where typically if we were to be doing this not during a pandemic, they would be at school, and I would make sure that they weren't there. And I couldn't do that,
Yeah.
and they got to see the work firsthand and be a part of it. um, and they understand the need for this work and the disparities that you see across the city, across different communities, and they just have a real handle and understanding of that more than I think they ever would. And they got to see my husband's brother helps us on a regular basis, so he's there all the time. They get to see him, where
Yeah.
he was also a restaurant chef, so that we never got to see each other before this. So now they get to see their Chio every week, and they're really excited about that. Yeah. So there's good things
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think you'd mentioned when we were talking before that your husband's not at home as much anymore, that's kind of shifted, and the kids are back in virtual school.
Yeah.
So,
Um, so we have expanded, and we've been working with a new nonprofit called Brighter Bites. That's a
Mhm.
national nonprofit, and um, also has similar goals of food education and access for families that they work with. And with this new partnership, we've been able to do this work now 4 to 5 days a week. And what that's done is it's caused Omar, my husband, to have to be on site, because
Yeah.
he's kind of like the operations manager. I'm the
Uh-huh.
administrative manager. And so he's on site 4 to 5 days a week.
Nope, she
Do-
wants you. Whatever, what you can put. Yeah. Hmm. Do you want me? You're welcome to be here. You're welcome to be here. Yeah. Bye bye. Wave bye bye at sister. You're silly.
yeah, so he's been out of the house more the last few weeks, so that's been yet another adjustment that we're like, okay, now we have to readjust our schedules and figure out how to do school and work and all the life balance pieces.
Yeah, like, actually having some time off to.
Yeah, that too, which can be very difficult, but
Yeah.
it's a priority, so we have to make it happen. We've been very strict about our weekends and making sure that when Saturday comes, that's our day to focus on our family
Yeah.
and do things that feel good.
Yeah.
Because if we're not keeping that in our priorities, then what happens is we can't continue to do the work that we're
Yeah.
doing. Yeah.
What do you need? What do you need?
Hello.
We found that we ran into the issue of we were always doing projects on the weekends this summer. And normally, some of the time in the summer, we would be at friends' houses at barbecues or picnics or whatever. And since none of that was
Mhm.
happening, we would just go from one project to the next project to the next project.
Mhm.
And long
Yeah,
about July, we were like, we gotta start like not doing stuff on the weekends. Like this is
yeah,
not, and you know me, I'm usually really good about boundaries and having, time off and things like that. But we got so focused on all the different things that we could be doing, project wise. It was
yeah,
different than what we were doing during the week, but
right.
and so now we're
Yeah,
much
we
more
spent
conscious about, okay, we're not doing stuff that day or.
it's important to not do anything and have those like relaxing sit on the couch days. We have done a lot of hiking, and
Yeah.
um, because I our whole family needs to get out into nature, and
Hmm.
being folks who live in the city, like it's even more important for us to make sure that we make a point to get out of the city. And even during the pandemic, like that was our reprieve. We would
Yeah.
go jump in the car and we would go out even just for a day trip and get out into the woods, and make sure that we had that connection. And if it wasn't for our ability to do that, I think I don't know what we would have done. But
Yeah.
we're so grateful to have had the chance to leave the city, like in the midst of all of this too, because it allowed us to keep going.
Yeah. I've been grateful that we live on 2 acres. So we've been planting trees and building like a whole perennial garden. And we've got the animals and stuff. And it means that we've kind of got that built in outside time.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Well, where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you're doing?
Yes. So if you're local to Queens, then of course join us for our our grocery program. But we also do virtual cooking classes for families as well. That's something that we still continue to do. So you can visit our website at theconnectedchef.com and find out all about those options. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Connected Chef.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Chase, for having me.